Welcome to Web Handling. My name is Dave Roysum. In today's show, I describe some important traits of early adopters, why computers can sometimes play a vital role for pioneering, and the price paid for being a Neoteric. I know your time is precious, so let's get started. Many technical leaders, including myself, are Neoterics. But before we begin, let's define the term Neoteric, since I was not even aware of that word prior to assembling this video. The list of synonyms range from architect to trendsetter. I will define the term as someone who is aware of current trends, is able to select from those many trends a couple few that might be useful for the purpose at hand, and finally is able to use those new tools to take a project to completion. Let's take a tour of one of my man caves and see if there are any clues to being a Neoteric. The first thing you see is my office workstation, where I run the business, write, and make videos. How I make videos was thoroughly documented in Web 301.20 to 23. Then you will notice a lot of artwork that I've made, including frame photos, jigsaw puzzles, paint by number, and more than a few models. I am always making something. Next, you will notice a collection of old science toys, such as robots. Also, notice the second of 4 computers in this room, which is a museum-quality Commodore 64. Next to the Commodore 64 is my PC, on which I play keyboards, as well as do flight simulators and virtual realities. Finally, we end up with one of my 2 bookshelf walls that includes a very large collection of old science and science fiction books and toys. Does this man cave reveal any clues about being a Neoteric? Perhaps. Certainly we see ample evidence of a wide-ranging curiosity, and that is a common trait among many creatives. Still, I'm not sure that this list of seemingly unrelated hobbies is super helpful in understanding Neoterics. To find a possible theme for professional success, we need to return to our man cave tour and look a bit closer for possible clues. My office workspace is surrounded by books, which I describe in Web 301.03, but also by computers. Let's take a closer look at 3 of my 4 primary computers. All 3 have totally different operating systems. All 3 companies were pioneers in the personal computer revolution, which began, quite conveniently, just about the time I began my first job as an engineer and could thus afford these tools. But to see why computers made such a difference, we need to do a timeline. My first serious introduction to electronic tools was in my freshman class in a quite conservative rural high school, where I was the first boy allowed to take a typing class. All I had to do was sign up. Obviously, learning typing skills early was very helpful later on. A half-decade later, I was the first person in my small college to use a scientific calculator, which generated a bit of early controversy whether or not calculators would be allowed for tests. I didn't care either way, because by that time I had been using a slide rule for more than a decade. My first computer was the Commodore 64, which incidentally was the largest selling of any make and model of computer. I was hooked. At the same time, on my first engineering job as a winder designer at Beloit, I did ANSYS finite element modeling on one of the most powerful mainframe computers. Again, I was seized by enthusiasm for computers, but this time as tools. In 1987, I bought and built a Heathkit robot while going to grad school. It cost a month's salary and 100 hours to assemble this 7-axis, 7-sensor robot. I used it on an instrumentation project during my master's in engineering mechanics program to make a digital talking scale by using the robot's A to D converter to read a homemade load cell and then use assembly language routine I wrote to speak the weight. The Commodore Amiga, the big brother to the Commodore 64, was the first computer capable of handling and making video. And that I used then for the first CG animation at a TAPI conference. Shortly thereafter, I bought an Apple Mac II, which not only did my PhD winding work on, I was also the first student allowed at Oklahoma State University to use a word processor for their PhD thesis. Prior to that time, you could only use a typewriter by their rules. This computer and its software were good enough that I not only wrote my first 3 books on it, I also did the typesetting for those books. Doing personal video animation in 1987 was way ahead of its time. But the experiences encouraged me to begin a YouTube channel in 2013, the very one you are watching now. Since then, I have made some 500 instructional videos. Of course, there are downsides for being an early adopter. It is very, very expensive. It is also very, very time-consuming. It is also zero-sum, meaning that any time or money spent there must come from somewhere else. In my case, one of the somewhere else's for time was that for decades I watched virtually no TV whatsoever. Finally, if you spread yourself thin rather than focusing on a single area of strength, you will fail, or at best be mediocre at most things. So, what might we learn from these experiences? First, riding the leading edge wave of computer hardware software without focusing or latching on to just a few areas could be immensely helpful in establishing your career before others claim that space. Second, that the computer wave has long passed. And so now, if you wanted to ride a wave, it might be for some computer app or another, or perhaps something entirely unrelated to computers. Third, you must be aware of trends and make good guesses and commit, but be ready to switch if it is no longer showing notable progress. Knowing when to adopt and commit to a tool, and equally important, knowing when to abandon a tool is not easy to figure out. Many engineers don't keep themselves current, much less keep themselves on the cutting edge. And many researchers don't know when to move on. I hope you have enjoyed this retrospective on Neoterics. Stay tuned for next week's show, where I will show how to manage the energy for success. If you have a topic you would like to hear about, let me know in the comment section below. If you found anything interesting or useful here, please like and share and subscribe. See you next time.